Hello, you're welcome to another episode of the Optimized Podcast with Osai Treskaro. What if I told you that all your expectations for the year 2024, whatever year you're listening to this or watching this, will not happen in your comfort, convenience zone, what I'll call your CC zone? Today, we are exploring why the path to extraordinary results in whatever year is not found in familiar terrain. Rather, is waiting for you in the unknown, the uncomfortable, and yes, the unfamiliar terrain. That's why on today's podcast, I'm talking about the unfamiliar advantage, mastering the art of strategic discomforts. I normally will use these words when I teach young people. I tell them sometimes you need to put yourself intentionally in trouble because a lot happens in that unfamiliar terrain. First, you must understand the fact that the familiar terrain is a trap. Yes, I'm one of those that took the concept of the comfort zone to a totally different perspective because I'm one person that do not just I don't accept the norm. I always want to question things. I found out the part of comfort that is necessary. I'll say, for instance, your comfort zone may not necessarily be a problem because the comfort zone for the fish is the water. The comfort zone for the bird is the air where the bird flies. So we are actually created to be at our best in our comfort zone. That's why in my conversation, I came up with what I call the comfort and the convenience zone, what I call your CC zone. Nothing productive happens in that zone. The comfort and the convenient parts will always lead to predictable results. That's the first thing you must understand. So if you are thinking about unpredictable results, if you are thinking about result beyond what you are familiar with, you want to do everything within your power to stay out of your comfort and your convenience zone. Because staying in your CC zone is actually risky. It means you are preparing to repeat your past instead of preparing for the future ahead of you. There's a hidden cost to the familiar routine. That hidden cost is simply a mastery of lack and poverty. I stumbled into a skit that I watched yesterday, and it was a very funny one. I saw a man dressed like a pastor approached a young man and said, "Sir, what's your time?" He said, 12 noon. And he said, "You are powerful." He said, "You are really, really trying. What do you do?" The guy said, "Nothing." "Nothing? You're not working?" He said, "Yes, it's not working." "You're not into business?" He said, "You must be powerful." And he now said, "You are very comfortable in poverty." That's when the guy became shocked. All the while he was saying that he was powerful, he was trying to imagine, how are you surviving life in complacency? That is what happens in that CC zone. Comfort and convenience zone breeds complacency. Let's look at what defines the unfamiliar terrain, because what I'm saying now is that I'm encouraging you to embrace that terrain that is unfamiliar. So by this unfamiliar terrain, there are things you need to know that characterizes this unfamiliar terrain. The first is new skills outside your current expertise. So the desires, the plans, the goals that you have documented for this new year will require that you jump into unfamiliar terrain. And one of such terrain is a terrain of new skills outside your current expertise. The second is conversation you have been avoiding. I was meditating this morning and this came to me that there is hardly anybody going through anything who cannot tell you why they are going through what they are going through. At least they have some sense of the reason why they are currently where they are. And to a reasonable extent, they know what to do to come out of that place. But the challenge is in taking the step to do what you know that you are supposed to do, that you are not doing. I think that's where challenge comes. It's not because people don't know what to do, it's because they are not able to gather the confidence, the courage to do what they ought to do. There are conversations you've been stylishly avoiding. And when I sit around this conversation with someone that genuinely loves me and listen to their counsel, things will turn around. So the third is that business moves you've been trying to avoid ever attempting. I think you must come to terms with the fact that not taking risk is a risk in itself. So make that business move, fail at it, and learn the lessons. You will become better than the person who has been having the same thoughts but refuse to act. Then the fourth is those lifestyle changes that scares you. Like I said earlier when I was talking about the conversation we have been avoiding, you already know that if I can alter my lifestyle in this area, things will begin to work for me better. You know it. So my conversation this morning, or my charge to you this morning, is make the move. If you don't know what to do, reach out for help. There's always help around you. If you're listening to this on your favorite podcast channel or you're watching this on YouTube, two ways to connect. Ask questions, make comment at the comment section. Check the show notes, see how we can do some one-on-one engagements. Then the fifth and the final around these characteristics of an unfamiliar terrain is those relationships that are beyond your usual circle. We've heard over time, even in our last podcast, we talk about the network and its impact on your net worth. How your self-worth will determine the network that attracts you, and how this network will eventually optimize and advertise your self-worth, which become your net worth. There are relationships beyond your small circle that you need to break into. You need to become the kind of person that such relationships attract. I'm sure you're already learning something. Share this podcast with your friends. Ensure that your colleagues are listening to this with you. So next, we want to look at the psychology of new territory. The psychology of new territory. And I'm going to divide this particular session into 4 different broad topics. We're going to look at why your brain resists unfamiliar paths. In fact, this session of our podcast is a masterclass in itself. And I encourage you, if you have listened to it up to this time and you don't have a pen and a paper with you, this is the right time to get your pen and paper, grab a cup of coffee, ensure you dedicate the next 20 to 30 minutes to this. It's a comprehensive masterclass that if I was to do this in a session on a one-on-one with anybody, I would charge nothing less than 100,000. So take this seriously. Take your pen and paper. Let's look at these four different dimensions. Why your brain resists unfamiliar paths. 2, the growth that happens in discomfort. Then 3, we'll be looking at how uncertainty triggers innovation. Then 4, we'll be looking at the science behind adaptation and learning. First, let's look at the reason why your brain resists unfamiliar paths. The first, I want to talk about the amygdala protection mode. Your brain has this inbuilt alarm system called the amygdala. And you want to think about this as your internal security guard. It's constantly scanning for threats. In my course, the Mind Your Money, when I talk about how your mind affects your finances, I talk about how this amygdala kick off to ensure that it keeps you within that part that you have communicated to it as your comfort zone when it comes to your finances. Before I dig deeper into this, when it comes to your finances, there's an amount that has become very common and normal to you. Your amygdala records that amount. Every time there's a conversation around an amount way bigger than that, it kicks in and tries to protect you from such conversations. And even if you even break further to have that conversation, when it is time for such conversation to materialize, it kicks in because it's been trained by you that conversations around such amounts of money signifies danger, danger, danger. And its core job in your life is to protect you against threats. So the same thing when you step into unfamiliar terrain, this guard goes on high alert. He's not necessarily trying to hold you back, he's just doing his job of keeping you safe. Because what you have communicated to it as your safe zone is recorded by your past actions and behaviors. So whenever anything outside that safe zone is happening, it kicks in, trying to ensure that it protects you and puts you. They are like the security guards that protects the president. So when alarm goes off, they know where to take the president to make sure the president remains safe. So your amygdala are your mental security guard. That's why the first instinct might be to retreat whenever you face a challenge. That's your amygdala swinging into action, trying to ensure that you remain safe. That's one thing. I call that one the amygdala protection mode. And the second is the energy conservation principle. The truth is, our brains are wired to conserve energy. And how does it do that? Following familiar paths require less glucose and mental processing power. So when you take an unfamiliar route, your brain needs to create new neurons. In one of our past episodes, I talked about how celebrating little wins help your brain to retain and create new neurons. And I talked about the fact that my definition for knowledge is the creation of new neurons in our brain by reason of the practice of the things that we learn. So as you're watching and listening to this on whatever platform, you're actually getting information. So, but when you begin to put those informations to work, your brain begins to develop new neurons that stays and that becomes knowledge. But the truth is, the brain is also lazy. The brain will rather want to go through the familiar route. So every time you get onto the unfamiliar route, your brain needs to create new neurons, new pathways, which require significant energy. So this explains why you find yourself mentally exhausted after learning something new or stepping out of your comfort and convenience zone. So these are things that we must know. And that for every opportunity for you to stay within your comfort and your convenience zone, anybody that promotes that is not helping you. It's not helping you. So the people that challenges you to unfamiliar zone are more or less your purpose. So the third is the growth. Let's look at the second thing I said we're going to talk about is the growth that happens in discomfort. In your discomfort zone, there's what is called neuroplasticity activation. So when you are uncomfortable, your brain releases what is called the norepinephrine. Think of it as your brain's version of Red Bull. This chemical actually enhances your brain's ability to rewire itself. It enhances your brain's ability to rewire itself. So this is why you remember challenging experiences better than you remember comfort and comfortable experiences. As you're listening to me, as you're watching this, some of us can remember challenging experiences that happened some donkey years ago. Why? At that time, something new, a new wiring happened. So for some of us, when we go through the academic terrain, you see, particularly from some of our schools in Nigeria, will say, man, that school will stress you. You know what? That school stretches you to develop new versions of your brain. That's why, having done that for a number of years, you are given a certificate and given the permission to practice. So every time you embrace discomfort, you are literally rebuilding your brain to be stronger. Then the second around that growth that happens in discomfort is the stress growth connection. There's a sweet spot in discomfort called the optimal anxiety. It's like working out. If you notice, if you lift a weight that's too light, you won't grow stronger. That's you just remaining in your comfort and convenience zone. But if you lift a weight that's too heavy, you will get injured. So, but when you find that challenging middle ground, that's where the magic happens. That's the principle that applies to every area of your growth, where the stress and the growth connect. When you are not too stressed, neither are you too comfortable. So when you are able to find that middle ground, something happens. So, Ted, let's look at how uncertainty triggers innovation. There's what is called the pattern breaking effect. When you are certain, your brain can't rely on its usual shortcuts. I said something that your brain also wants to be lazy. So whenever you are uncertain, your brain is trying to do something new because now it doesn't know the regular paths to take. Because it's certain now that where you're going now, it doesn't know it before now. So this forces it to what scientists call the exploratory mode. Once your brain kicks into that exploratory mode, is now beginning to look at how to come up with new invention, coming up with new invention. I was listening to Elon Musk yesterday. He says sometimes you need to think until your brain hurts. Does it surprise you why he's coming up with some new and revolutionary concepts that's helping the world? So think about this. How many great inventions came from accidents or mistake? Do you know that when Instagram started, it was actually a check-in app called Bobbin? It was only through uncertainty and user feedback that they pivoted to becoming the photo sharing giants that we know today. I have one of my mentors who is a researcher and a scientist, stumbled into a particular product by mistake. He was researching and producing another product. He made a mistake and stumbled into something else that's worth billions today. So once the brain sees that unfamiliar terrain, it creates something new. So never get so comfortable in your old parts, because one of the things that happens when you do that is you become a master of poverty. You gain mastery over lack. I used to say this: at every point in time, you are either building wealth or trying to master poverty. Because the truth is, your brain will do whichever you push it to do. Your brain will do whichever you push it to do. So the second thing around that uncertainty triggers innovation is what is called the necessity factor. Uncertainty in every situation, in every industry, we create gaps. And once those gaps are created, these gaps becomes opportunity for new products, for new services. As the saying goes, necessity is the mother of all invention. When you are in unfamiliar terrain, your brain is forced to create new solutions. This is why some of the most innovative companies were started during economic downturn. The PayPal, the Airbnb. How do you even imagine someone owning a house and turning a part of it to a hotel for guests? Sometimes, some of us, when these things happen, that's when we begin to make sense of it. How do you imagine someone building a ride sharing application without having a vehicle and yet making more money than the people who own the vehicles? That was the model of Uber. All of these things emerged when someone went through a challenging situation and decided, instead of complaining, to engage his mind to come up with something better. Then finally, we'll be looking at the science behind adaptation and learning. You know, there's what is called the myelin strengthening process. Every time you push through discomfort to learn something new, your brain creates a substance medically called myelin around your neural pathway. Think of myelin as that insulation for your brain wiring. It's like when your brain is creating that new wiring, Like your regular wire, you will see an insulation that ensures that the current that goes through it doesn't shock you. So your brain serves as the myelin serves as that insulation over the wiring. So the more you practice and adapt, the stronger this insulation becomes. This is why the second time you do a scary task, it usually gets easier than the first. What's happening? You are building on existing myelin pathway. You're building. I shared the other time when I talked about the neural pathway, I talked about the fact that the first person who goes through that bush may have used a cutlass to create his path and walk through on barefoot. The second person, two, three, four, 5 person can then go through because the path is already clear. The next time you see a bicycle, you see a bike, you see a vehicle, before you know it, it's a tarred road. Someone first created that path. So that's the work of myelin. It insulates you. And once it gets stronger, that pathway becomes an easy one. And immediately that becomes an easy pathway, my charge for you is that you challenge yourself to a higher responsibility. Because the truth is, your brain is limitless in capacity. Your brain is limitless in capacity. Then there's what is called the recovery principle. This is how this works. Your brain's adaptation process works like muscle building. It's like you go to the gym, you go on a workout. Truth is, you don't get stronger during the exercise. What happens is that you get stronger during the recovery period. That's why if you get on the gym for the first time, your instructor will tell you when you get back home, you're going to be tired, your muscles are going to be hurting, but that's not the time to go take medicine. All you need to do is come back tomorrow, go through it again. After a while, the recovery principle sets in. So the same applies to learning and adaptation rather. Each time you push into unfamiliar territory and then reflect on the experience, your brain consolidates those lessons during the rest periods, particularly during sleep. This is why reflection and rest are just as important as the challenge and test itself. So I'll leave you with these actions on this segment because this is a very long session. I'll leave you with these actions on this segment. Start with small doses of unfamiliar experiences. Then document your adaptation processes. Then balance challenge with recovery. Fourth, celebrate the discomfort as a sign of growth. Then use reflection time to consolidate learning. If you missed it, just do a rewind and listen to it for time's sake. Now, I'll get into the third segment, which is the 4 domains of unfamiliar territory that I recommend that everybody must jump into if you want to be able to create new results. The first is professional elevation. Take on projects beyond your current skill level. Speak up in rooms where you feel small. Go ahead and charge prices that makes you uncomfortable. I called one of my mentees recently. I said, see, you need to leave this environment. And that doesn't have to be physical. If the people in the environment where you operate can no longer afford you, what is simply telling you is that you have outgrown them. So you must create opportunities for people to engage you globally. That's the essence of the virtual world, the online, and all of the digital technologies that are available to us. Create content that exposes your vulnerability. Jump into terrains where you find out that I'm supposed to do this, but I don't know how. Then you begin to find out how. Once you get to know how, your brain records it. It becomes your new comfort. Then second is personal development. Engage in a lot of morning routines that challenges your habits. Learn skills that intimidate you. Learn skills that intimidate you. Get off that comfort. Gone are the days where all you know is all that you were taught in school. All you know is based on the certificate you acquired. And every time there's a conversation, you are referencing your last certificate that you got like 4, 5, 10, 20 years ago. It's gone are those days. Learn new skills that intimidate you. Physically challenge every limiting push. Push beyond your limits. Get into those emotional conversations you've been trying to avoid. All of these are necessary for your personal growth. Then let's talk about your financial growth. Learn about new investment strategies. Learn about new investment strategies. You've been hearing about cryptocurrency. You've been hearing about different don't lock yourself in what you knew about it in the past. Sit down with experts. The more you know, I understand that most of these terrain have their own risk, but the truth is knowledge reduces risk in whatever industry. So the more you know, the less risk you face. Check on those business models outside your comfort zone. Look out for new revenue streams you have never explored. Take financial decisions that requires courage. Get my book, Money Devotion. It will help you. Have a daily routine around your finances. So then the fourth is relationship expansion. In our last conversation, we talked about the power of standards. And I talk about what you need to do to be able to enter into some new relationship. Build new network. Build network outside of your national territories. There's nothing wrong if you live in Nigeria, you're beginning to build a network of friends in the UK, build a network of friends in Europe, beginning to build a network of friends in the United States. Get into those industries. Begin to introduce yourself. The world is a global village. Technology has bridged us. Collaborate in projects with unfamiliar partners. Jump into mentorship roles you haven't attempted. Seek for mentorship. Give out mentorship. But the truth is, whether someone is mentoring you or you're mentoring somebody, both of them will shape you. Join some communities you have been hesitating to join. Then number 4, navigation strategy. Let's look at this navigation strategy. How do you navigate new terrains? In fact, I actually came up with the acronym terrain. First, you must trust the process of growth. Don't try to jump the process. There's this common rhetoric. There's these common words that we use here that when you jump up, you will come down. But when you grow up, you stay up. So trust the process. 2, embrace the discomfort as a learning opportunity. 3, research and prepare. The more you know, the less risk you face. Then 4, risk calculated moves. Remember that knowledge will reduce your risk. Once don't expect any level of insight that will totally eliminate risk. If you want to totally eliminate risk, you are simply putting yourself in that comfort and convenience zone where you take no action. Then adapt quickly. As you take risk, learn new things, adapt quickly. Then iterate based on feedback. Don't get too emotionally attached to the path you have chosen. Yes, follow that path, but for any reason, as you learn on the go, adapt the new knowledge and alter the path. It is very necessary. Then never retreat to comfort and convenience. Comfort and convenience is deadly. As we begin to wind down, I want to recommend that for the next 30 days, do this. Take this as a personal challenge to yourself. Identify your comfort zones, map out unfamiliar terrain that are opposite those zones, create small daily challenges that will take you from your current comfort and convenience to that unfamiliar terrain where you anticipate some great things will happen. As you are engaging in those daily challenges, document your discoveries. A short pen is still way, way better than a long memory. Use your mind for imaginative processes, not for memorizing. Use your pen to document. Then celebrate little wins. You may want to go back to listening to our podcast that talks about celebrating little wins. Then these are common pitfalls you must avoid. Retreating at the first sign of difficulty. I'm sure you've understood the fact that a lot happens to your mind during difficult times. In fact, there is this narrative that said difficult times create strong people, and strong people create soft times. Soft times will create soft people, and soft people will end up creating difficult times. The circle continues. If you want to enjoy softness, you need to build that tenacity within. Do not retreat at the first sign of difficulty. Second, don't compare your journey to any other. Don't compare your journey to any other. Third, don't try to master all of these things at once. That's why we started by talking about you trusting the growth process. Then don't neglect to document the lessons, because that's like a diary you can fall back to. Then, in closing, I need you to remember this. The greatest discovery in human history happened when people ventured into the unknown territory. So your next level of success isn't hiding in your comfort and convenience zone, it's waiting for you in that unfamiliar terrain. The question isn't whether you should go there. My question is, will you go there now, or you want to waste another 1 year or more in your familiar territory? I think this is the time for you to commit to taking that bold step and tell yourself, whatever happens, I'll manage it from there. I've heard this, that people that said, if I perish, I perish, hardly ever perish. So my call to action in conclusion is that at the comment section below, just share one area of unfamiliar territory that you are committed to exploring this year. What's that one comfort and convenience zone you are ready to leave behind? Because remember this, your courage might just inspire someone else to take that first step too. So my charge to you is that take the first step, succeed at it, share your challenges, get help where necessary, and become better at what you do. I'm trust that this session has truly been a masterclass. Please do well to share this, get your friends and family, get everybody within your network to listen to the, and above all, leave a message for us at the comment section. Let's be clear, let's be certain as to how this is affecting you. Shalom.